Drifter paid $30 and his bridle to send her message. She answered with his ring. The dust was pale and fine, and the sound inside the telegraph office was a steady tap like a cricket under glass. Townsfolk pressed in the doorway to watch the clerk hold up a bill with red wax and a county stamp. He said the schoolmarm owed $32 in a new wire duty, or her message to the judge would be cut, the message that named custody for her dead sister's child. He said, "Pay, or the paper dies in the wire." The sun fell clean on the brass key, and on Clara Wyatt's hands they were steady, though her dress cuffs were dark from riding. She said the fee was posted as $2.50 for 20 words. The clerk smiled and said that was before the mayor found the drought in his ledger. The square breathed and no one reached for a purse. The child waited on the step in a neighbor's arms and did not cry. Not yet. A rider with trail wind on him slid from a clayback bay and tied the reins to the crooked hitch. He moved like a man who had learned to keep trouble near his shoulder. His coat was plain. His boots had seen distances that make a map look small. Some men recognized the line of his jaw from wanted sheets that had browned and blown away. Isaac Holt, they whispered. He had once scouted for a company that shaved land with steel. He stood at the counter and put down a stack of well-handled notes and the bay's bridle. He said $32 in cash and the bridle as pledge. He said the stake is named plain for all to hear. The wire goes through and the custody petition rides. If the county wants more, it can take my saddle outright. The clerk laughed and looked toward the door where the mayor's bailiff leaned. The bailiff let his hand rest near the club that had split more crates than arguments. Clara looked at the bridle like it was a man's skin laid down for a stranger. The room clicked as the key shivered. The mayor came in on cue like a horse that smells oats. Silas Greevy wore a black coat with summer still months off and a ring with a scratched seal. He said, "Isaac Holt, scout turned drifter. Your name spends badly in this town," he said. "The schoolhouse sits on future track and the company wants quiet," he said. "If the teacher sends her paper, the judge may freeze our work and I cannot have that." He lifted the red stamped bill so light poured through the ripples. He said the ultimatum's soft, and he said, "It cold. Pay $50. Or the message is ash and the child goes to county custody by sundown." The word sundown drew a line on the floor. Men shifted like cattle when a gate slides. The clerk's fingers made a little dance on the key and the brass looked tired. Clara said the law is not a shovel for your rails. The mayor said law is what prints and shows seal. Isaac set both palms down like a man bracing a beam. A deputy in the window flinched at his own reflection, and the first shot went where light already was. A warning round into hard dirt. Grit ticked the window and a bottle on a shelf shivered. Isaac drew fast, with the muzzle never lifting above a man's belt buckle. He snapped a single shot to the floor 3 feet from the clerk's boots, and the floor jumped and the clerk danced. The second shot spat dust under the bailiff's heel. The room learned the shape of air that answers to iron without tearing skin. The crowd exhaled through teeth. The mayor drew his coat closer as if that could stop noise. Clara stepped into the space the bullets had not taken and set her paper on the counter. She said, "Send." The clerk swallowed and moved the key. The wire sang a thin, brave line. The bell at the far end would click where a judge sat 3 days by stage away. The bridle lay between them like a promise that had a smell, sun and salt and animal and debt. The schoolhouse was a square of pine boards at the far bend. Inside it was cool as a cellar and bright where the window beam fell across the slate. Isaac set the bridle on the sill like a token on a church plate. Clara poured water from a blue crock into a tin cup and said, "Drink." She said thank you without sugar. He said you can have the bridle back when I earn it. She said you will not if the mayor keeps his word about sundown. The word had weight as if it carried stones. She said the judge has 3 days to wire back, but Greevy gave me hours. She set a page on the desk. It was a hand copy of the town plat with a note. A surveyor had found the school lot marked as public before any company charters. The copy was inked with care that looked like prayer. Isaac said the company will call it a smudge. She said the company calls bones a smudge when bones slow their plows. He said he had a name in that book too once, and it tasted like rust in his mouth. A courier came at a trot in county grey with a ribboned case. He was young enough to believe ribbon is power and old enough to be tired. He read a proclamation with the creak of a door, the schoolhouse to be boarded and the teacher to vacate by sundown under penalty of trespass. A timer nailed in words. He handed over a printed notice and wanted to keep his hand. Clara folded the paper and set it under the bridle on the sill. She asked the boy if he meant to watch a woman pack books in front of children. The boy's ears flushed. He said he only knew how to knock and hand. Isaac said then knock at the mayor's door and hand him back his ribbon. The boy held breath and let it go and left. The clock on the wall ticked without warning that it would stop. Clara stacked readers and slates and inkwells. Each thing was weight and each one said stay. Isaac shaved a rough peg to fix a table leg that had always leaned and said, "The leg is an argument for staying too." Two men in tidy coats and city boots came next. They did not take their hats off because they believed hats served them. The taller carried a leather tube with a roll that smelled like courthouse. He said he was Alden Trask, agent for the High Plains Railroad. His partner was Noble Hart, the company lawyer of record. Trask looked through Isaac like through a window needed for light. He said the company would buy the schoolhouse for $1 and a handshake. He said refusal would make the town pay double for the privilege of being improved. Noble's tongue had the shape of the word inevitable, and he wore it down slow. Clara said, "The school is not for sale." She said, "I have the plat copy and the judge will read it," Trask said. The judge reads what prints. He set a brass timepiece on the desk and opened the lid and said, "Sundown." He tapped the glass with a nail. Isaac watched the nail and thought of the key, and his trigger finger twitched and then lay down. Domestic breath came like a breeze that does not change the heat. Clara lit the stove and set beans in a black pot with salt back that would barely flavor water. Isaac cut kindling against his thigh, and the knife left clean lines on dry wood. Their talk was short and held in the work. He said, "I can sharpen the scythe and oil the latch," she said. "Take the latch first." The child slept on a quilt made of shirts that had known another man. The quilt had a square with a stitched name, Nathan. It held its thread under fingers that did not forgive. The paper law lay under the bridle, and the brass timepiece ticked 3 times too loud to be honest. Clara hummed 1 bar of a hymn and stopped, because a hymn felt like asking for comfort from the thing that caused the cold. The window showed a clean world that did not care. They both looked toward the road, because the road brings all things in the end. The major escalation came not as thunder, but as a train bell sound claimed by a wagon. Trask had set a platform at the courthouse steps and had a box of boards ready to shutter the school. Townspeople gathered because people gather at a sound. Whether it is mercy or not, the bailiff hammered a notice into the post, and the notice said, "Trespass," and the notice said, "Penalty," and the notice said to go home and say thank you to progress. Clara walked the street with the bridle in her hand like a banner that did not flutter. Isaac walked at her shoulder without talking. The company had set 2 riders with repeating rifles muzzle down and a boy on the platform with a hammer. He looked sick from trying to look proud. Trask's brass timepiece gleamed on the plank like gold that had lost a bet. The sun did not move even when men lied about time. She set the bridle down next to the watch and stood where teachers stand when they count heads. The decisive confrontation started with the same act, done different. Isaac stepped up with both hands open. He took the brass telegraph key he had unscrewed from the office when the clerk ran to fetch the mayor. He laid it on the plank in front of Trask. He said, "I am paying again, and the town will see how." He set 40 in notes and the bay's saddle this time and the key. He said the stake is named plain. We buy the right for that key to talk without charge for this one message that says, "The school lot is public and your claim is smoke." Send it loud to the judge and to the territorial ranger in Sweetwater. Trask smiled with bone. He said, "That is not how law works," Isaac said. "I know how wire works and how men work when they are watched." Noble Hart drew a folded paper with a seal and said, "The teacher is in contempt." He nodded at the riders and they lifted rifles halfway. Isaac drew and fired a single round into dust where dust was already willing. The sound cracked and left ears hungry. The second round was into the post where the notice sat. The nail bit deeper and sang. The rifles came down because men with rifles like orders and no orders had landed yet. Clara lifted the plat copy, and the crowd leaned. Ranger Eleanor Vale had the habit of walking in when men found they had words stuck. She did not arrive as savior. She arrived as a fact. Coat dusty, book of warrants under her arm. She had ridden fast from a telegraph that had not been cut because a clerk had tapped like a drummer in a storm. She took the plat copy, and she took Trask's watch, and she held both high where daylight could weigh them. She said, The timer is not a badge and the seal is not a god. She read the survey note out loud and the note said public. She pointed to Noble and asked if he had countersigned a duplicate road levy in May. His eyes went like a window shutter in a gust. The mayor said, "You have no jurisdiction over the progress of steel." The ranger said, "I have jurisdiction over duplicate signatures and unlawful seizure and over men who wrap the wire around a school to choke it." The crowd made that soft noise people make when pride leaks. Trask tried to reach for the key, and Isaac set his hand on it so lightly it looked like a memory. They let the rifles hang muzzle down. A rule the ranger spoke with her eyes. Noble tried to turn the crowd with a sermon about future ease and present discomfort. Clara said, "The only future I can count is the one that reads." She set primers and readers and a slate on the plank so folks could see what would be boarded shut. Trask took a step to swat them away, and the ranger said, "Try." And Trask put his hand back where a hand belongs. The bailiff's hammer hovered. The boy's knuckles were white and the hammer looked heavier than a forgery. Isaac lifted the telegraph key and set it on the notice. He said, "Listen to something honest for once." He tapped a short pattern. He sent the judge's docket number and the ranger's badge code and the word public twice. The sound felt like water thrown on hot iron. Trask snapped and grabbed for the key. Isaac turned his wrist and the key slid under the bridle leather like a turtle into mud. The crowd laughed once and then remembered their fear and swallowed it. The mayor said, "Seize them both." Isaac breathed out and did the first act a third time. He paid with the only clean thing he had left. He laid his holstered revolver on the plank butt first, and he laid his father's ring next to it. He said, "Take this and call it bond for the teacher's hearing." He said, "If she fails to show, you can keep both. If she does show, and if the judge reads what is under your nose, you give both back." Trask saw a trap and wanted to step anyway because pride hates plain terms. Noble hissed and said, "Accept the bond and arrest after the show." The ranger moved her book and said, "I accept it because the law looks better when it stands up with a name." She wrote Isaac Holt in a hand that had cut men loose and tied men tight. She wrote the hour, and she wrote the word sundown again, and this time the word did not drag chains. The first riders put their rifles down on the platform like men setting table legs. The bailiff lowered his hammer, and the plank still looked like a gallows without a rope. The crowd became witness instead of audience. The second pole finished its circle, when the company foreman arrived with a crew and a stack of shutterboards. He saw the ranger and changed his face. He said he had orders to board. The ranger said, "You have an order to wait." He looked at Trask, and Trask looked at Noble, and Noble looked small. And the foreman looked at the town and decided to wait, because waiting keeps teeth. Clara stood quiet, and Isaac counted the ticks in Trask's open watch and thought about how time is a law for the poor and a suggestion for the rich. The child in the neighbor's arms made a sound that could have been a laugh or a complaint. Both true. The judge's return wire came as a boy ran from the office holding a slip like fire. His chest heaved and his hat fell, and he did not stop. He put the slip in the ranger's hand, and the ranger read. She smiled without showing teeth. She said, "The school lot is held for the people, and the seizure is void, and the custody petition is docketed for hearing on the 10th day. People clapped once and stopped, because clapping felt loud and unholy. Consequence had to land with something heavier than paper. Trask tried to save face by stepping into the space between the ranger and the desk. Isaac stepped with him, and they bumped shoulders like bulls testing fence. Trask reached for the revolver bond and the ring bond, and the ranger put her hand on his wrist. She said, "You can touch neither until the court says you can." Trask turned his head to Noble and found his partner reading the tops of his boots. The mayor looked at the ring and thought of his own ring and decided to cough and call for water. Someone laughed then, and the laugh sounded like a window opening. The ranger said one more thing, and she put the telegraph key in Clara's hand. She said, "You decide when the wire speaks for the school." The teacher's eyes did something that no law can bind. She set the key on the plank again like a sacrament. She tapped a short pattern. She sent thanks to the judge and the word begin. The crowd quieted to hear what beginning sounded like. It sounded like brass and hope. They ate after because fear burns sugar. Isaac sat on the schoolhouse step with a plate that held beans and a slice of corn cake. Some woman thrust at him and walked away fast. Clara poured coffee from a black pot and said, "The taste is honest and hard and will not flatter you." He said, "Hard is good when it keeps a man awake," she said. "The 10th day will come faster than we want." She said, "I want you to be standing when it does," he said. "The ring is yours to decide after the 10th. She said, "You will not speak of rings before I have a desk that does not wobble," he said. "The peg holds." She ran a finger under the desk edge and found the peg and nodded once. Time moved in close and blinked and stepped back. The bridle still lay on the sill under the county notice that had become only paper again, and the brass key sat in the chalk tray like a pet that needed feeding. Evening walked down slow like a cow that will not be rushed. The mayor sent one last try in the shape of a deputy, with a bottle and a promise. The deputy said if the teacher signed a temporary relocation agreement, the company would let her teach in an empty bunkhouse north for 1 season. He said the bunkhouse had bats and no window, and a floor that counted splinters like pennies. Clara set her cup down and said no, with a softness that cut. The deputy looked at Isaac and decided the night was unkind to fools. He left and shut the door gently because boards remember blows. Isaac checked the latch he had oiled and listened to the river. Clara spread a quilt for the child and smoothed it. She hummed one line and stopped. The clock ticked and the word sundown came and went and took nothing with it this time. The child breathed even. A man with a name wrote it down in his chest. Dawn did what dawn does. It made last night's courage look like a sensible thing, and uncovered the trouble that had slept in tidy coats. Noble heart did not sleep. He wrote 2 letters, one to the company office, one to the judge, both with the same ink, but very different weather inside them. Trask had ridden in the dark to catch a stage to Sweetwater to complain at volume. The mayor shaved and cut his lip and bled on his collar and cursed like a child. The ranger sent one rider to fetch the clerk who had taken duplicate fees, and one rider to look at a culvert where the company had moved a boundary stone. "This is what clean daylight looks like," she said to the town. "It looks like legs." Isaac helped mend the school fence where boys had pretended to be buffalo and had been truer than they knew. Clara chalked letters on the board, and the letters stood up like little soldiers, and then turned into words that could be read by men with calluses. The 10th day felt nearer when work had a rhythm. The hearing put the town on a bench and let it sweat. The judge rode in with dust and a folded mind. The ranger stood. The mayor stood. Noble stood. Trask stood late and loud. Clara stood with her hands at her sides and the brass key in her pocket, as if it were a coin. Isaac stood at the wall as a man who had sold a ring to buy a word. The judge listened and tapped the side of his paper, as if to find the hollow spot. Noble argued about progress again. The ranger read numbers again. Trask blustered and said schools could be moved like cattle if the new pasture had water. Clara said, "A child is not a head of beef." She held up the plat. The judge looked at the surveyor marks. He asked who had sent the first wire. Isaac said the teacher did with my hands and my stake. The judge looked long at Isaac and saw a man who had done a poor thing in one season and a decent thing in this one. He ruled for the school. He fined the mayor a sum that made his eyes fog. He wrote the key into the record as an instrument of notice. Trask tried to turn the last screw after the gavel thumped into a palm. He stepped close on the courthouse steps, where anyone who breathes town air goes to test their size. He said to Clara, "You won this inch. Winter will take it back." He reached for the brass key as if he could snatch the sound of a victory from her hand and make it mute. Isaac moved, but not fast enough to be a threat. His hands open, he said, "Leave it." Trask smiled and put 2 fingers on the key ring. Clara lifted the key high the way she had lifted readers the day before, and then she did the opening act a final time and made it mean another thing. She paid with something heavier than money. She set the ring Isaac had given in bond into Trask's palm and said, "You will carry this to your office and you will keep it on your desk, and you will look at it when you file anything with a school in its name. You will remember what bond means. You do not get the key, you get the reminder." Trask looked at the ring like it had weight he had not trained for. The crowd learned a new quiet. Then, the rifles stayed down and a single warning shot cracked into the street from a nervous hand 3 doors away. Dust reached up and fell. Men did not reach for blood. The ranger took Noble's pen and handed him a broom and told him to sweep the platform where the judge had stood. Because sweeping is a thing men forget teaches them law, the mayor signed a paper that said he would pay the teacher the illegal wire fee from his own pocket, and the clerk counted out coins with fingers that shook. Isaac picked up his revolver bond when the judge nodded, and he did not strap it back on yet. He held it like a tool that had a new set of rules. Clara took the bridle from the sill and put it back in Isaac's hand, and this time it felt like it fit. The child reached for the key and missed, and reached for Isaac's thumb and did not miss, and the town saw it and did not say bless it, because some blessings are better silent. They ate a proper meal that night, because a proper meal proves to the day that it could not break you. Stew with meat that had been waiting for a reason, bread with salt and a little lard, coffee with a second dip. Isaac mended the schoolhouse hinge with a new screw the blacksmith had slipped him for nothing. Clara wrote lesson plans by lamplight and knew by heart which boys would test the room and which girls would hold it together. Isaac said the bay would like a softer bit and he would trade work for it. She said, "Name the work." He said the pump handle squeaks. She said, "I thought that squeak kept coyotes away." He said my hands squeak less when oiled. She laughed once. It was short and warm and it climbed up the beam and nested there. He did not ask about the ring and she did not offer. Some words are better when they come through clean wood. Micro things kept the edges tight. A new rule posted at the telegraph that said fees by the inch, not by the face. A chalk box left on the step by someone who did not sign their name. The ranger's warrant book gone for a week and then back with a mark on a page where Trask's signature lay. A group of railmen who came by to listen outside a window as letters turned to words. The bay's bridle mended with a stitch that looked like patience. The mayor liked to keep a hat on now, even in shade. Noble bought a slate and tried to do sums at night with his wife laughing kindly at him. Isaac found himself saying "on your left" in the morning when he came up the school path. He had been a man who kept right. It was a small change that made a line new when summer broke into that first hard storm that turns the road into pudding. The pump handle did not squeak, and the school roof held where Isaac had set tar and tin. The child learned to stack blocks and then to toss them. The ranger rode through and left a paper with a new seal that said public trust. The company sent a different agent for a different town, and he came quiet and left quiet. The mayor still shaved too close and cursed in a church voice. The clerk's hands were steadier and he charged what the yard chart said. The telegraph key sat inside a glass case that Isaac built from a window he found behind the depot. Clara said the case was a little pride and a little shield. Isaac said, "Both belong." The key glinted and told a story every time the sun moved. The day Isaac brought a small box to the schoolhouse. He set it down like a man setting down something that had heat. He said the judge mailed it back with a note. The note said bond discharged and respect noted. Inside the box lay the ring. It looked smaller now that he had lived without it. He did not pull it out. He pushed it across the desk on the wood he had made steady, and the edge of the box whispered. He said, "You told me to wait past a desk that did not wobble, and past a roof that did not leak, and past a pump that did not squeak." He said, "I am past those. I am not past every debt, but I have learned to pay without hiding. Will you take my hand on a day without a gavel?" Clara looked at the ring and then at the window and then at the beam where her laugh had nested that night. She said, "Bring it to the square on Saturday at noon when faces can see, and let the key sit in the sun with us." He said, "I will." And the way he breathed made the room turn warm. Saturday came in clean and stayed. Townsfolk stood not as a crowd hunting for a fight, but as neighbors who wanted to watch something slow and right. The ranger stood near because that is what habits do. The mayor tried a smile and found it fit better than last year. The clerk wiped the glass on the key case with his sleeve. Isaac and Clara stood where a teacher had stood with primers and a drifter had stood with a bridle. He said nothing long. He held the ring like a coin he had finally learned the value of. She held out her hand like a balance. He set the ring where balance said yes. A murmur rose and fell, and the telegraph key flashed once as if the brass approved. There was no band, there was no paper with ribbons. There was daylight and the sound of a child clapping blocks together because blocks know more about rhythm than speeches do. The rifles at the edge of the square were in their racks, muzzle down, and dust turned slow in the sun. When you pass Willow Ford, you will see a schoolhouse with a sill that holds a bridle where a notice once lay, and you will see a glass case with a key that once bought breath and now buys memory. You will hear a pump that works, and you will find a man sanding a desk edge and a woman reading a line that the town can now finish. You will not see much of what could have wrecked them, because that is how clean days hide. In the West, a coin can be a lash, and a bridle can be a bond, and a key can be a weapon, and a ring can be a law. What matters is which hand lays which thing down under which sky. If this sits right, carry it to the square where you live next time. A paper tells you not to look and a clock tells you to hurry. Name your stake in daylight. Pay into wood, not skin. Keep guns down. Let dust take the shots. Hold the person you mean to hold after the worst word passes. And teach the wire to say begin before it learns to say regret. Click on the video to watch story that moves you much more than that. Subscribe to the Wild Frontier Tales and tap the bell so you never miss our heartbeat tale.